Hey leaders, in this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Lorna and I are privileged to be joined by Laura Elliott. Laura has worked as the behavior consultant at Horizon School Division in Southern Alberta and has been in this position for the previous 11 years. Laura has been integral to assisting schools in understanding the underlying causes that initiate behaviors in classrooms and schools. Schools have accessed Laura then to help with her expertise in crafting and refining continuums of support in schools whose priority is focused around behavior. So let's get started.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts.
Welcome to another episode of Leading Collaborative Response. As always, I'm Lorna Hewson, co-founder and lead learner of Jigsaw Learning.
And I'm Kurtis Hewson, ditto.
Today we are joined by Laura Elliott, who we first met when she was a behavior consultant with Horizon School Division in southeastern Alberta, Canada. The central office is located in Taber, Alberta, and serves 21 schools and 19 colony schools. So before we jump into Laura's experience related to collaborative response, let's learn a little bit more about her and her work in the challenging area of behavior.
So Laura, thank you so
Hi,
much
Laura.
for taking time today. It's great to see you once again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great.
So Laura, can you give us just a little bit of an understanding of your background as an educator?
Yeah, our opening really didn't totally do it justice of,
No.
of your journey as an educator.
Well, I think particularly in behavior, it is a journey. There is no university degree in behavior, right? So everyone that I've ever met that is a behavior consultant or specialist or whatever has varied backgrounds. So it's kind of fun actually. So yeah, I have always been interested in kids. Even when I was in high school, I was working playgrounds and in the summertime, and I would end up with the kids, the bad kids for some reason. So that got me intrigued. I went to university for a couple of years thinking about teaching, and ended up not in teaching. I was going to go into social work, and then I ended up the child and youth care program at the college, Lethbridge College, was just opening. I was actually the first graduate class in the first graduate class. So yes, I took the child and youth care program because I was just intrigued by these kids with these wild behaviors.
Yeah.
So so from there, I worked in several group homes for 4 years. I took a 10-year sabbatical to have my children. I have 3 wonderful children and a few grandkids now too, so it's awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
And then yes, when my kids were back in school, I went back to work. Worked for McMahon for 15 years. In that time, I started to specialize in fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I ended up being able to put together a program for adults with FASD. And so I was immersed in FASD.
Yeah, for sure.
If you know about FASD, you know that it comes with all the behaviors, right? So I learned a lot from these individuals. So yeah, from there, 15 years was long enough to work in social services, just saying. And so I heard about they were looking for a behavior consultant at Horizon, and I put in my name. And in the meantime, in the middle of all of that, I went back to university and my degree
Of
while my
course.
kids were in school. I wanted to graduate before they graduated from high school. I wanted to graduate from university. So yeah, so
Great.
I got my Bachelor of Professional Arts through Athabasca, and that allowed me to apply for the job at Horizon. So, and they hired me.
Awesome. So, just to give our listeners a little bit of background, what were some of the responsibilities, or what did that role entail with Horizon? That's where we first began to interact and engage with you, Laura.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's one of the reasons I got hired is because I was the very first behavior consultant there. So I was given the positive behavior support binder from Alberta Education and said, have at her. Good luck.
I know that binder.
Yeah, right? So it was quite the blessing, actually. I was allowed to kind of build the program based on the needs that I saw throughout the division. And so it's been an interesting journey. So like I have basically my job was to meet one-on-one with teachers, with education assistants to help them with kiddos that were struggling. I would observe kiddos that were struggling and just watch for what other people might not be able to see because they're too busy up at the front of the class dealing with everybody, right?
Yeah.
So I got to see some of the, interesting things that happened. And I would just report on that and then give them some suggestions on what it is that they could do differently to support this child. A big part of my job was training, teaching people about behavior, about all the different behaviors, autism, ADHD, FASD, ODD, all of the behaviors.
Yeah.
Because this is a soapbox of mine. It really frustrates me that the universities do not provide education around behaviors. So that was a big part of my role as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting, Laura. And I had the privilege in both of different districts that I had worked with to fill that space as well in being able to go into classrooms and help teachers to understand what was happening with students and why those behaviors were surfacing. It's such a unique position because there, like you mentioned, there are no replications. Like there's no one situation that is like this one or this one. Like so it would be so much easier if we could say, when this happens, this is what you should do. But it's not like that.
Not even close. Not even close. You're absolutely right, Lorna. It was so many times where, oh, this kid has autism, so we'll just do it the same.
Yeah.
No.
No, and each one is so unique, and that's I mean, that's why they're precious too, because everyone's
absolutely they all have their own strengths. We've gotta dig them out sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Laura, one of the kind of core mantras that we always use in the world of behavior is communication. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that means?
Yeah, and obviously you've had a lot of experience that have kind of built up your guiding philosophies.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear when you think of supporting a student with challenging behaviors, what have been some of your key insights that you've been able to garner over the years?
Yeah, you know what? Like when I was in the child and youth care program, we actually were required to read a book called No Such Thing as a Bad Kid. And that is one of my mantras. Actually, so I just recently retired, and when I retired, I put together little cards so they wouldn't forget me with all of my mantras on them.
Oh, neat.
And one of them is no such thing as a bad kid. And that was like one of my goals for Horizon, is to help explain that behavior is not about defying you, or they don't like you, or right. It's all about exactly what you said, communication. And what are they communicating to us, right? So that's what I find fascinating. I put on my detective hat, I tell people all the time, to try and figure out. I mean, when I do the training on what causes behavior, um, it basically comes down to somehow they have the lack of tools to be able to do what you're asking them to do. Whether that be because of sensory issues, whether that be because of some diagnosis that includes impulse control or any of the executive functions, whether that be a learning disability, whether that be mental health issues. Um, Trauma is huge
Hmm.
in how kids are unable to do what we're asking them to do. That fight, flight, or freeze piece has been a really big um, learning experience for a lot of the people that I have had the pleasure to work with. And even nowadays, health, the lack of sleep and the
Yeah.
addiction to the social media um, has really impacted behavior as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of those things lead to behaviors in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So this podcast is around leading collaborative response, and so we're going to start to make that connection because I
Yeah.
know you were really key in helping schools utilize some of the framework and structures to be able to then address the issues that they were seeing around behavior and
Hmm.
what it was that students were communicating or needing. So I'd like to go back because I remember when you were engaging in some of the first iterations and workshops around collaborative response, you getting excited and seeing the connect. So love to be able to just kind of speak to some of those early thoughts or ideas around the collaborative response work. And then we're going to start connecting because I know you became critically important in the school division, particularly around developing continuums related to behavior. So maybe starting off with some of your first impressions around the collaborative response work.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I started the job without any kind of framework, right?
Hmm.
And so when I attended some of your sessions, the there's that possibility of a framework that I could use to help to do my job much better.
Hmm.
So being able to, like, you guys just have it so nicely parceled that into the different areas of the data and evidence. So, and I didn't have that sorted out in my brain.
Hmm.
And so being able to have it set out for me here, that's why you saw me get so excited. It's like, okay, this is all making sense for me and how I can improve my practice, and help the schools to do a better job of managing behavior.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is really key in that collaborative response work because if you're seen as the sole expert who comes in one kid at a time, that's really hard to do from a single school perspective, let alone
Well, and
the 21
unsustainable.
schools, 19 colonies. Like that's
Yeah.
unsustainable. You need structures
Yeah.
to be able to take the learning that you're doing with a team and then
Hmm.
diffuse it out, which again becomes a critical role when you're coming into a school's collaborative team meetings and offering suggestions and ideas that others are learning to then propagate and diffuse that in their own conversations when you're not in that space.
Absolutely. I think that it was really good timing for us because I think at first Horizon needed, like, I really pushed positive behavior support. I
Mhm.
think that the whole division needed to understand the reason for behavior. They needed to understand how to support behavior instead of punish consequence behavior.
Yeah.
And that didn't go away.
Yeah.
That was throughout. But once there was more of a general understanding, absolutely, then they didn't, like I always said, I wanted to work myself out of a job because these are tools that other people can get themselves, right? It's not, here's the magic wand, or here's the specific tool for this specific kid. It's what works for all the kids all the time, some of the kids some of the time, right? Like so to be able, just, that's a really good word, I like that, to diffuse it across to all of the schools. Made my job a lot easier.
Well, and it's so great to hear that, that you're really looking for a way to be able to help people to understand, and really that's collaborative response is that framework. It's not the answer to everything, but it provides the structures and processes for us to have great conversations where we learn from each other, for us to use the data that we are collecting on students and to understand that data in a way that we can impact what's happening for them, and then for us to articulate what is it that we do through the continuum of supports. What is it that we can do for students in the area of behavior? And that's true of any other area too, but it's exciting. We get excited too when we hear that it really clicks. That framework really clicks for you in the work you're doing.
Absolutely. Like one of the things that I noticed is we got less reactionary.
Yeah.
Right. So you had to react to every student or every situation. And when you have these positive behavior supports put in place, and you have this framework of, this is what we do when we have this kind of kiddo. And like you said, Lorna, not a specific strategy, but a framework of, this is how we deal with it. Everyone is much calmer.
Yeah.
In the whole building. And one of the things I talked about a lot was co-regulation, right? If everybody's calm, that really helps the situation, right? So yeah, it does provide that framework so that people feel like they know what they're expected to do and can do in the moment when the kiddo is struggling.
Yeah.
So Laura, I know you were really key in helping schools establish their behavior continuums of support. And we know that the purpose is similar to creating a literacy continuum or a numeracy continuum, but the process of walking through that does look different. Let's get into the weeds. Can you share what that process looked like when you would come in and a school said, can you come and help us develop our continuum of supports for behavior?
How did you do?
Yeah, how did you go about doing that? What does that look like? We'll be right back to continue this episode.
The key to a comprehensive collaborative response in schools is understanding that layers of teams need to be established in order to best support each and every learner, as well as the staff working diligently for their success. In order to coordinate and optimize support beyond the classroom, the school support team is critical. However, how that team is organized matters. Join us for the online workshop, Ensuring Effective Response Beyond the Classroom, 5 Considerations for Effective School Support Team Meetings, part of our Supporting Collaborative Response series. In this workshop, I will reveal 5 considerations for every school trying to take their school support teams to the next level. I'll also be sharing numerous resources, templates, and samples to help transform the supports put in place beyond the classroom. Access this on-demand workshop and you'll have the ability to view and replay all or any portion of the workshop when it best fits your time. Register today to learn more about this critical collaborative structure, integral within a school's collaborative response.
And now back to our conversation.
Well, I threw it together as usual.
Yeah.
So I just sat back and thought about some of our schools and what they needed. And so what I did, I literally put a PowerPoint presentation together. And step one, we watched Dr. Ross Green's video on no such thing as bad kid, right? Like the reminder of behavior, right? And then because you have to be on the same page. If you have staff that are feeling like, oh no, we gotta kick that kid out. Like you have to be on the same page, right? And so I would start with reminders of what behavior is about and like take the questions, like have at her. Ask me, yeah, but what about? Because we have to be on the same page. And so I go through the reasons like I did at the beginning of this conversation, just go through the reasons for behavior. And then what I like to do is I like to look at it practically then. So then I have them split up into pairs and I say, okay, pick a kid, pick a student in your school that you're struggling with that you both know. And I want you to complete the I get them to, hold on, I had to write it down. Lagging skills and unsolved problems sheet from Dr. Ross Green.
Yeah.
All right. So I have them fill that out so that just reinforces this is communication. They're trying to tell us they don't have the skills or they have a problem they haven't been able to solve.
But
right?
you're asking them to get really explicit in name them. Name what it is that we're seeing.
Yep. Yeah. But usually they know the kids well enough to be able to start doing that, right? So once they've done that, then I would get them back together, have a conversation, and then I would hand out the behavior key issues for them. All right. And I have them fill out on their own what they think the key issues are for this kiddo. Thinking about, is there trauma? Is there, like, what are some of the key issues? Have you thought about, are there sensory issues, right?
Yeah.
So going through on their own, looking under a microscope, this kiddo, and why they might be behaving like that, right?
So essentially, if we were to use that old analogy of the iceberg, of being able to see the tip first, name, articulate the tip, and then go underneath the surface and what could be happening underneath that, what we see.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like 100% of the time, you guys, it just garners empathy.
Yeah.
For the kiddo. Like every time.
Sorry, Laura.
That's okay.
That's exactly where we want to go.
Yeah. It switches from, I need to control this kid is causing problems in my classroom, to, oh crap, poor kid. What can I do for him?
Yeah.
That's where I want him. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's where we want people to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So from there, I actually have them watch one of your videos, Kurtis, the Understanding Tier 1 and 2 Continuum video, to help them remember what a continuum is, and where we're headed. And then I do the sticky note activity.
Yeah.
So I have them, and we have a big discussion actually after your video about the Tier 1 is all of the students all of the time. So it's the big rocks. I really liked that. The last time we got together, that we had a conversation about big rocks. That really resonated with me. That it's kind of like a title. And then under the title, there's ideas of what you could do, but there's certain things that are particularly important to each school, right? And so I talked about those big rocks, and then I would then talk about some of the students some of the time and what that looked like. And then I had them write all of these things on sticky notes and put them up under, Tier 1's over on this wall, Tier 2's over on this wall, and have them put up their sticky notes. And it's interesting because many times they will say, that's not very many sticky notes. Or there's a lot under sensory because this school in particular had a lot of kids with autism. So
Yeah.
they got really good at sensory,
Yeah.
right?
Lots of experience.
So yeah, it's interesting that they notice the holes, the gaps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So then like just from there we talk about those gaps and where to like fill their tool bucket, like where
Yeah.
can they find some more tools to help them. Um, not as easy to find as literacy stuff, gotta tell
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
right? I've been using a website pbis.org for I don't know how long because
Forever.
forever because it has the most extensive list of things to do, right? But it can be
Yes.
overwhelming for some people too. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's basically and then we end it with this is step one.
Yeah.
And right. And so now you guys compile this and then have another meeting together. I'll come if you want, but I haven't been needed to. They have it figured out, and then they figure out their tier 1, 2, 3, and 4 strategies, put it together.
The part that I really, really appreciate with that, Laura, is you could come at it from two different perspectives. One could be, I have the title of behavior consultant. Great news. I've saved you the work. Here is a continuum. I've done the
Yeah, no.
research. I've gathered it all together, but you're not doing that. And I think that's really key is that we move to co-creation, understanding what do you already do and how does it
Mhm,
fit within this. The
They have to have
co-creation is so
ownership,
important.
right?
Yeah. Yeah,
For
and
sure.
without that ownership, then it's one more dock that we have, and there's no shortage of
Absolutely.
resources that we can access. But where
Yeah.
is that dock? Where,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I know she gave us a
Yeah.
website. Well, where is that we could utilize rather than reflecting on our own toolboxes, gathering it together, and being able to reference our continuum?
I think the other
Mhm,
part of that too, and Laura, you can probably speak to this too, but the other part of that is when we identify strategies through that sticky note activity, then
mhm,
sometimes people have a realization that, oh, that is a strategy I could use in this instance, that they hadn't really thought about it in terms of behavior, but this really surfaces and makes it clear that there are so many good things that are happening in the school already.
Absolutely. Yes, it's similar to the collaborative team meetings in that way. Like people are throwing out ideas and it's like, oh yeah, I used to do that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that reminder for them is great
yeah,
too. Yeah,
yeah, for
Well, and I
sure.
think what's vital that you've done there too is you could just come in and say, all right, what are all the strategies that we have for behavior? And oddly enough, or not oddly, I guess, happenstance, I tried that once within my own school. And I joke now that we created a triangle of consequences.
or a pyramid of punishment.
Yeah. Right? Because we had
Right?
the step that you
Yeah,
suggested of, but can we understand the why
yeah,
underneath it?
Hmm.
which
And
is
then let's
so
address
critical.
address the why, not just the I have a kid who tears up things when they get frustrated. So what do you do? What's your strategy? Well, I send them to the hall to cool down, or I um,
Right.
get them a page that's laminated that they can't rip up. Well, we probably haven't addressed what's going on underneath.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For sure. And I think that's what like teachers are amazing people and
Mm.
education assistants. And it's best. Like the schools that I have done it with, they've had both teachers and education assistants there and the administration. Um, like they love kids,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
if you give them one more reason to love them, it's okay, right? Yeah.
yeah. And I love that idea of, as you move through the activity of being able to identify what are those underlying causes, that we really are creating empathy for for children. And you're right. The educators will go to the ends of the earth for kids. But being able to recognize that we need to be empathetic, especially for these kiddos.
And I have to tell you, like behavior is so like almost demoralizing. Like it's people come into the room, continuum of supports for behavior, and just are down.
Mhm.
Like they don't want to talk about these consequences that we're going to set up, right? And by the end of the conversation this way, there was excitement in the room. Like
Yeah.
they're like, actually, we can do something with this kid. Like that's exciting, right?
Yeah.
So
But, and I
yeah.
find over and over and over again, and this is one of the underlying reasons for developing that continuum of supports is I need something where I can turn and say, yeah, what I've tried isn't working.
Yeah.
What else could I try? And realize that, the one strategy that I use that seems to be successful for most students, in this case, isn't working. What else
Mhm.
could
Well,
I try? That it's not I throw my hands up in the air and somebody else better take this kid.
well, and let's face it, it's a very stressful situation to be in when you've got students who do exhibit behaviors that might be threats to other kids or threats to you or threats to themselves. Like that's a huge problem for teachers. And automatically, your first reaction is to go into stress or to, okay, somebody else has to figure this
Or
out
reaction.
because I don't know what to do. But when we have developed that continuum of supports, we've actually had, when people are not in stress, in that stress mode, that we can actually talk through, what are those possibilities that you're facing and how do we actually do things to support that student?
Yeah, and those kind of kiddos are often the ones where we do the collaborative case management meetings, right? Like
Yeah.
we meet with everybody, including parents and that kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
that we can get a handle on why this behavior is happening,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Well,
right.
For
and I
sure.
think you've alluded to something that we always talk about with that understanding of a continuum of the anchor resource becomes valuable. And you've shared one with us from Tabor Christian High School that we'll
Mhm.
make sure we link in
Yeah.
with the show as well. Like that doc is valuable
Yeah.
to be able to reference, but I think you're alluding to the process of getting to the doc is actually
Even
more
more.
important because you're
Yeah.
creating that empathy, like you said.
And that common language amongst the staff,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? Like we start talking about, oh, I wonder if there's a sensory issue instead of like, do I send them to the office, right?
Yeah.
Like it starts, yeah, you start talking differently, I think, within the school.
Oh, I love
And
that.
yes, that Tabor doc, I mean, that's where those big rocks, like I love, they took some of the reasons for behavior as their heading, like promoting staff and student health. Health is one of the reasons, right?
Yeah,
Building relationships with students. Well, I tell
absolutely.
people all the time, the number one way to deal with behavior is relationship, relationship, relationship. It's one of
Yeah.
my mantras, right? And then promoting student engagement in and ownership of learning. So, because if kids are feeling like they belong and that they are in charge of their own learning,
Yeah,
their behavior is different as well,
for sure.
right?
But that becomes so powerful with as a staff team if A, we understand what those things mean, and B, we all
Hmm.
commit to doing them as,
Yeah,
like you said, as our big rocks,
yeah,
then we're going to impact more and more students. And then we still have the opportunity to, yeah, but when that doesn't work, here's another set of
Then
strategies.
what?
And then,
yeah,
like you mentioned before, then we have our meeting structures to be able to come together and utilize these resources effectively.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You bet.
So, Laura, we have a couple
Hmm.
questions we always love to ask on this podcast, and I'm going to lead off with the first one. The school division had engaged or has engaged in collaborative response work for a number of years. From your perspective, as a result, could you finish this statement for us? As a result of collaborative response, we have seen. How would you go about finishing that? We'll be right back to continue this episode.
This question is brought to you by WeCollab. Designed by educators for educators, this comprehensive digital system aligns with the foundational components of collaborative response. Moving from conversation to action, WeCollab empowers classrooms, schools, and systems to provide the very best response for each and every child by informing action-based decision-making with data and evidence supporting student success.
And now back to our conversation.
We have seen more continuity between schools, like within across the division. Continuity in regards to how people see and deal with behavior, literacy, numeracy, all of those things. I think that the framework piece for me is the biggest. I think, yeah, that we've seen that continuity and a little, like, I think more confidence that something can be done, that we can do something about this, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. And both of those things are so important to that overall message and implementation of collaborative response. So we have another question we're going to ask, and this one is a little bit tricky. So just you're welcome to take a moment to think about it. So
Okay.
in the spirit of if you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give to your past self in relation to this work?
And I'd love to even just infuse even further in relation to working with students with challenging behaviors.
Like I think I spent some time kind of like paddling, in the water instead of swimming, right? And just keeping my head above the water to try and solve everybody's problem one at a time, right? So if I knew then that I could do this is how we can do it. For, like like I said, some of this, or all the students all the time, some of the students, some of the time, like that just so resonated with me. And so I think if I could go back, I would have spent a little more time swimming.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said, being able to work with an entire staff team to get the common language and continuity rather than, like you said, I've heard someone refer to this before as whack-a-mole, where you're just trying to respond to each individual thing that's happening on an individual basis, and you're probably not building system capacity by doing that.
First meeting I went to, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is going to make my life easier. Because like I really resonate with the whack-a-mole thing.
Yeah.
I found that over the years, the number of referrals for direct observations went down.
Yeah.
And the more I got more involved in like the team meetings or involved in whole training, that kind of thing, and less the direct observations.
Yeah, and I assume that's not a result of we all of a sudden got different kids coming in. It was just the skill set and capacity had grown substantially.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Laura, we want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and share. And
I have one more thing.
Yes, please jump in.
Wait. Very important. Follow up.
Oh, yes.
So Tabor Christian put theirs together and did a fabulous job, and it was beautiful, and they printed it off and put it in every classroom because kids are allowed to see it too, right?
For sure.
And then they had me out for a staff meeting just to see how they were doing, right? And very, very smart move, because it was like we did it at the very beginning of the year. And then a month in or 6 weeks in, I had said, I want to come back, please. And so 6 weeks in, I come back and they're like, oh, yeah, right? You're so busy doing the work.
Oh, so busy.
That you forget about the work you've already done.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. So that's my last, top piece of advice is for sure do a follow-up to make sure that it stays fresh, and it is one of those documents that doesn't, collect dust in a corner somewhere, right?
Yeah,
Well,
that's for sure. We do a workshop that we say, good news, your continuum is never finished.
Mm-hmm. Right?
yeah, it's not a
Absolutely.
one-off activity. It's
No,
ongoing. Well, really, it
no.
becomes a mechanism for an ongoing conversation
Yeah.
about how do we support kids? What does
Yeah.
that look like?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So, Laura,
All
as
right.
we go to wrap up here, if anyone had questions and wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way that they could get a hold of you?
I actually still do have a email with Horizon because I'm doing contract work. So laura.elliott@horizon.ab.ca would probably be the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Okay.
Awesome.
We'll make sure to include
Yeah.
that in show notes as well. So, with
All
that,
right.
thank you so much for taking time, sharing your expertise, and for the great work that you've been able to do across the school division and beyond.
I don't know if you noticed, I'm pretty passionate about it. So
Oh, we
It's
have.
thanks for
clear.
having me. Thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to, spread the good news.
Well, it was so great to see you again. And thanks so much for joining us, Laura.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, you too.
All right, let's jump into some key learnings or reflections from our conversation with Laura. First off, so good to see her on
I know,
screen
I was
again.
just going to say the same thing, that it's been such a long time since I've seen her, and so it was so great to see her again. And like she wrapped up there, she's so passionate about this
Mhm.
work, and has such a clear way forward in her mind. When she's working with people, she just really knows, this is the way that we move forward.
Yeah. So, what stood out to you as
Oh
some
my
key
gosh.
learnings from that we can take away from conversation with Laura?
Well, so one of the things that she talked about early on is that idea of these students who are engaging or demonstrating these behaviors, they're actually not able to do some of the things that we've asked them
Yeah,
to do.
I love there's no such thing as a bad kid.
Yeah, so
That's
understand
important.
that they're actually not able to accomplish what we're putting in front of them, which then results in flight, fight, or freeze,
Mhm.
and which is why we end up seeing all of these behaviors.
Well, and one of the things that really prompted us to bring Laura on was utilizing the fundamental or foundational components of collaborative response
Mhm.
to attend to behavior work. Because as I was hearing schools coming back and saying, Laura worked with us to create our behavior continuum, they were really excited about this. And I think her understanding of co-creation
Mhm.
was a huge part of this.
Yeah, and a result of that is that schools, and she said, became less reactionary.
Yeah.
That we actually have moved now into a proactive frame because of our structures, because of the common understanding. And she
Mhm.
said it a few times around
I wrote down common
common
understanding.
that
Yeah.
we're building the common language and understanding around what's happening in that realm of behavior, and really moves people to a different place
Mhm.
in how they respond.
Well, and I think too, and this is a big part of the collaborative response work,
Mhm.
is we recognize there are pockets of exceptional expertise that exist within our organization. And Laura is a great example of
Yeah.
one. But if that pocket of expertise is trying to respond to one kid at a time,
Mhm.
that's really difficult. And her recognizing that creating diffusion
Yeah.
is really, really critical if we want to be able to respond to the needs of our students.
Yeah. I also, just thinking about her past experience and working with individual students all along, and trying to figure out how do we support many children in a setting like a school,
Mhm.
and without having to go one child at a time.
Yeah.
And we speak to that often through our collaborative structures and processes, that the whole premise of that is, let's bring people together.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've shared it often, but it's always interesting hearing it from another perspective, that idea of through this framework, we start talking differently. And she recognized that of, we have formalized structures and processes in place, but the informal conversations that just make up how we engage on a daily basis, it changes. And exciting to hear that was her experience as well.
Well, and one of the core components of collaborative team meetings is really going through that process of key issues. And it was interesting to hear Laura talk about the connection between students with lagging skills. What are the lagging skills which actually become the key issues in those collaborative team
For
meetings?
how we respond.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we'd encourage you check out the show notes, and we'll have an example of that Tabor Christian behavior continuum that she referenced there. We also have some other resources that you'll be able to access. As always, remind you, share this episode with a friend, like, subscribe to be able to engage in further learning. It's always exciting to bring on people with different experiences and areas of expertise to be able to share their insights. As always, if you're interested in learning more, check out the book Collaborative Response. There's a coupon code in the show notes to be able to access that. And we look forward to next time coming together to share some key insights around leading collaborative response. So please send questions, experiences, anything that you can share around the work that you're having in your own organization. With that, we're wishing you all the best. Take care.
See you soon.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content. Make sure to follow us on social media. Subscribe to the podcast and the Jigsaw Learning YouTube channel to access past and upcoming episodes. Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.